survey your audience, find out where you can go deeper, provide a shared experience that allows people to go deeper on that topic with you together. I think that the best community leaders are often someone that has many different experiences outside of community. They really thoroughly understand business because community is one of those pieces where
Kyle, thank you so much for agreeing to do this conversation. I know I'm meeting you after a long, long time after we met at the Pepper Content event a year back or more than that. Um,
right.
and this being a new series, and I'm just trying to find new ways of how I can introduce my guests. So, my first question to you is, who is Kyle outside of work? Like, what is something that people would not find about you online very easily? Like, if you can like just begin with that.
I don't know if I can if you can't find it easily online. I don't know if you want to find it. That that's where bad news comes up. No, I'm kidding. I'm pumped to be here. Really glad to be speaking to you. Who am I outside of work? I think I'm a very deeply curious person. So that's been a trait I think I've had for a long time. I grew up as an only child, so you kind of have to. If you're not curious, like you got really nothing else to do, and so I think that leads to deep curiosity, deep imagination. You kind of have to create an environment without other people around necessarily that you still enjoy. So yeah, deeply curious, was always a big reader. I listened to probably too many podcasts. I think Spotify is probably like sending me emails like, "Are you okay? You're listening to too many of our podcasts." You love to explore different parts of New York where I live, or different cities, and so yeah, just a deeply, deeply curious person. I think that's why I like the particular role I have, is I get to talk to a lot of professionals from a lot of different backgrounds and learn about their industry, their role, their function. We get to build courses for a variety of different professionals and get to go deep on all the different topics we are building courses around. And so, yeah, that I would say that's like the number one adjective I would use to describe myself.
Super. One observation I've had in my like in my circle at least is people who usually are single child. They are very introvert, and I would never imagine them to end up into a community space. Was
Yeah.
it also the case with you, like where you were an introvert for like first few years of your life, or it was not
Hmm.
like that for you?
No, it's a really great question. I'm actually very interested in. I don't know if there's been a study done, but I'm sure someone's done it about the correlation between being an only child and being more introverted. Because I'm curious if that is even true or not. I will say I actually describe myself still to this day as an introvert, and I think that and maybe one of my hot takes would be that I think introverts actually make much better community managers in general, right? Like, obviously, there's a lot of nuance and it's just one single factor. But how I define introversion is like what brings you energy? How do you like recharge? And for me, I love being around people. Like, I enjoy the experience, but it is like draining socially. Like eventually I do hit a wall where I'm like, wow, I really need to be alone. And when I'm
Yeah.
alone, reading or going for a walk, that's very like healing for me. I feel like I'm recharging. And so I still like being around people, but there is a limit where I hit. Now, the reason I say I think introverts make better community managers, and again, there's a lot of nuance here, but that's the clickbaity title, is I think when you're extroverted and you just get energy from other people, it's like you don't really have to be super thoughtful. Like you just show up and at a party and you're like, I love it here. This is so fun. Like you don't almost have to worry. When you're an introvert, I think you worry a little more about social environments because they're draining for you. And so you're really thoughtful about constructing social environments that understand both extroverts and introverts, both people that, are going to be there all night and people that, it's probably a little draining for them. And so I think there's a lot more preparation when you're an introvert, when you're doing anything in the community or anything live. And you recognize that there's some people that aren't just going to like it because by virtue it's energizing or energetic or tons of people are around. And so I think you create environments that are much more welcoming for the average person. So that's my hot take. I still would say I'm an introvert, but I do like, seeing people for at least for a little bit.
There was a study which said that introverts do make better social media managers than
There we go.
extroverts. But we'll cross check about the community part as well. But I'm sure I think it would be quite similar, at least as some aspects of the community management job. But thanks for answering that. I know this is just out of my curiosity. Coming to the question that I really want to ask you, and I think this was in one of your interviews where you talked about the Venn diagram of personal monopoly and how you studied political science and philosophy, and then coming into the community business was just like really meant for you, and how your skill set kind of really aligned with this all things. Do you want to just tell us in 30 seconds, or let's say 60 seconds, about what that was? Because that would just set the context for the further few questions.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think first, just to define personal monopoly, which is an idea I believe I first heard from David Perel, but it's been around for a while. And basically, it's this idea that you're unlikely to be the best at a single thing. Like, there's only one Michael Jordan. And if you're not Michael Jordan, you're not going to be the best at basketball. But if you're pretty good at, say, 3 things, if you find a way to stack those, like create this like personal monopoly, the Venn diagram where all of those overlap, you are likely going to be the best or the only at doing that thing. And so you can think of, you're not the best NBA player, you're not the best accountant, and you're not the best rollerblader, but I bet if you were in the NBA, also were a CPA and could rollerblade great, you'd be the only one in the world that could really do that. And so it's about thinking about your career rather than just being like the best at one thing, thinking about the other elements that you're also quite good at, and finding an environment where you can combine those things to be exceptional. And so that's a personal monopoly kind of framework. And I'm happy to talk more, but I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah. And I think it makes sense as well, because not everybody can be Jordan. And for people who are not
right.
Michael Jordan, what do they really like? How do they excel and be successful in their career, or maybe even their lives as well? So I think that definitely makes sense.
And just going off that, I think there's something really interesting here where many people are caught up in becoming the best. And that is certainly a big driver, and I'm not trying to knock that. But I think there's this other lens that is also trying to become the best, but it's kind of through a different way. And that is this idea of becoming the only. Like, can you just do something that is so unique and so true to you that you're really the only one that can do it? And then you've removed competition. And so by virtue of the fact that you're the only, you are also the best. And so I think I brought this up in a previous conversation, maybe that you had listened to from this, but Coach Carter, there's a great movie called Coach Carter that came out. I'm aging myself here. And one of the star players, I think his name is Ty Crane, they're like, hey, how do you feel about being considered the next LeBron James? And he says, I'm not the next LeBron James, I'm the only Ty Crane. And so I think about that only framework is also very important. And if you construct a personal monopoly, you put yourself in a position to be only.
Yeah. And I think, I have seen a lot of such individuals who embrace the personal monopoly, getting into building their cohort-based courses about certain specific masteries. Like, one of the things that's coming into my head right now is by this creator who runs a program called Nervous System Mastery. I'll link it up and I'll also send this to you. But I think when I saw the program for the first time, I was like, wow, this is something really unique. And this creator had had done psychology and a few other things, and he was a fitness instructor as well, and he just combined all the skill sets that he has into producing something that's really unique to himself.
Right.
And I have quite a few examples like that. But and at the same time, I'm doing these cohort-based courses references because we're going to get into those topics with Morning Brew and what you have been building. But to ask you this question without giving too much context, and just brushing into the main topic of this conversation altogether, how has community contributed to Morning Brew's growth? Because it's very interesting to see a newsletter venturing into multiple other newsletters, then into cohort-based program and more like an edtech plus like a media model kind of a thing. And at the same time, from an outside perspective, the growth story looks really like as a flywheel where everything is connected to each other. But would want to hear from you as to how did community contribute to the growth of Morning Brew?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'll, give my honest opinion on it. And to be honest, it is like, I've been at the company for 2.5 years now. I don't want to take any credit at all for any of the growth of Morning Brew prior to me coming here. And even when I've been here, it's growth in a different way. So how Morning Brew, the company, grew, I had nothing to do with. Like, that was all the original team, having a great referral system, partnering with other newsletters, and creating just world-class exceptional content. And I think the growth story of Morning Brew from that time is truly world-class. Now, how is community contributing to the growth of Morning Brew? Currently, I am the director of community at Morning Brew. I think that is much more a revenue growth opportunity, where community, we're playing in the, we're not, Morning Brew, for example, has 4.5 million subscribers. We're not trying to have a 4.5 million member community. What community is doing is it's going down the funnel. It's creating a service that is valuable and has tangible benefits to some percent of those 4.5 million people, or people that maybe come to us without even knowing what Morning Brew is because they want a course or they want a community, and it's monetizing them in a non-ad based way. So right now, for the most part, the majority of Morning Brew's revenue is ad based. We are not ad based. We're direct to consumer. We're getting individuals or companies to give us money. And so it is diversifying revenue streams. It's growing top line revenue. And hopefully that continues. And so community, I think, is just a way to diversify your revenue streams. It is a way to connect with your audience in a much deeper way, to truly go from audience to community, which maybe we'll talk about a little later. And so that's how we're contributing to the growth of Morning Brew. I also think it's creating a little more system lock-in, where if you maybe really enjoyed reading the Morning Brew newsletter, and then you come and take one of our courses, and now you're in an alumni community, and you're meeting other people that read Morning Brew, and now you're getting exposed to some new Morning Brew content, and you get to know me, and you get to know one of the writers, and you get to know one of the ad people. Like, you are really putting a face to Morning Brew. You kind of have more affinity and brand affinity to Morning Brew. And my argument would be you're much less likely to ever churn if you've gone through one of our courses, if you really feel connected to Morning Brew, because now it's like it's gone from this newsletter to almost the community, which I think is very important as well. So there's probably a retention benefit too.
Yeah, and I think a lot of there's something that I read, that all success are lagging indicators. Like, if you've put in a lot of effort in building this community, it's not always just that, okay, this is the revenue spike that we are seeing from this channel. Sometimes it's also the affinity that people feel with, let's say, with Kyle or other alumni that are part of the program, and just subscribing to other content pieces also. So I think a lot of these things is sometimes not seen very clearly, but glad that you look at those things as part of the growth story as well.
Yeah.
Tell me about, if you want to suggest somebody who runs a newsletter on Substack or any of these other platforms, and if there's a 3-step or a 5-step framework for them to start a community, but right now they're just running a newsletter, or let's say they're just running a YouTube channel, what would be like a 3-step or 5-step framework for them to start community as a vertical or a new direction for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if I had a newsletter on a certain topic and I wanted to build a community around that, what would I do? The first thing is you have to have a value prop. I think a lot of people assume that people join community for connection. I don't actually think they join community for connection. And we actually have a lot of data to support that on our side, where people are joining for the skills that they want to get through our cohort-based courses. They're joining for skills, not for connection. Once they join, they see the benefit and the power of connection. And often they cite that as one of, if not the most powerful parts of joining, but that's not why they purchased. And so you have to think about your acquisition strategy and your retention strategy. And those are very different, in my opinion, when it comes to any community-based thing. So the first thing is, if I had a newsletter and I wanted to build a community, if my reason for building the community, my go-to-market is like, meet other people that read this, failed, not going to work. People aren't going to buy that. So what extra value are they going to get? So if you have a history newsletter, maybe you have, a deep dive into a particular topic you've surveyed your audience on, they really want to learn about X, and you think a community or a course can really deliver that. That's what I would do first. Survey the audience, figure out what they want, go really, really deep. The second thing is that people create community through shared experiences. And so that's why I think just throwing people together on some Slack and being like, we have a community, it doesn't work. And eventually people will churn. Like, it's just, we have 800 Slacks. Like, why am I even here? So I think people have to go through a shared experience, understand a shared language, have something in common before you just dump them onto a Slack. Because if they come in with this pre-existing connection, it'll strengthen on Slack. If they come in with no connection, people will just eventually leave, stop checking their account. It'll become unengaged, and it's hard to change that momentum around. So, survey your audience, find out where you can go deeper, provide a shared experience that allows people to go deeper on that topic with you together. And then I think you have the grounds to create some sort of community. Once you have that, again, what's the value prop of being in that community? You can leak a bunch of, or not leak, but share a bunch of premium features with that community. I think it's very valuable where they feel like they're almost taking part in building. If you say you have a newsletter, like maybe you survey your community, what should I write about next? Now they feel like they're contributing, and you're really creating the sense where they're part of this broader experience, which is the newsletter and the community and the shared experience. So I don't know if that was 3 steps, 5 steps, but I do think that the big misconception is like, oh, just like start a community, put a bunch of people in Slack that are your readers, and then see what to do. And I would be adamantly against that.
Yeah. I think it's also just spoils the image that people would have towards your brand or towards you as a creator, that you started something and you're not investing in that purpose anymore. And I think that just becomes really sad. While we're talking about this, I have actually recently observed that a lot of SaaS companies or even traditional media companies are trying to at least build or start a community. Is it wise for every brand out there to just have community as a growth channel?
No. I don't think it's wise for every company out there to have community as a growth channel. I doubt it works for every single, any statement that's like all is likely wrong. I actually think there's probably too many companies that are like leaning into this like community type brands or community type feel that shouldn't be. Like, sometimes when I buy socks, I just want socks. I don't want to join a community of sock enthusiasts. Yeah. And so, I think it's becoming this big buzzword and people are getting sick of it, quite frankly. And so I would be, conscientious. And this gets me back to, I know maybe we're going to talk about hot takes, but my hottest take is, like, I talk to so many people and even companies that are like, don't worry, we totally get community. Like, you're not going to have to like prove that it's worth it here. Like, we totally are bought in, which is great on one hand, but also you should have to prove it. Like, community should help the bottom line of the business, period. That's why businesses exist. And if you can articulate why community is going to drive whatever goals the company has, then you shouldn't get a free pass. This doesn't mean that you turn a community on and it's an overnight success, but you can come up with proxy metrics, you can come up with a roadmap and why this is successful. And I think it's your job in any role to articulate why the work you're doing is important to the mission of the company. And I often feel like people just launch a community. There's not really a goal in mind. They use kind of like tactics of like, well, this will be good in the long run because of like brands, but we're not even measuring how that might be possible. And they never really get into the heart of the matter of like, what would success look like in this space? And if you can't answer what success would look like, then you shouldn't be doing anything. And so it's probably not good for everyone. Now, it depends on the team and the strategy you have around the community and what you're going to leverage it for. And I've seen it work wonderfully for a lot of companies. But for the companies I've seen it work, they're clear on what success looks like. They have a very clear roadmap on, what they're going to do kind of stage by stage. And they have kind of a go or no go philosophy where, hey, we're going to test this for some time. But if it's not working, we're going to kill it and invest our resources in something else.
Makes sense. And it also actually, if everybody just adds community as a growth channel for them, for their brand, it would kind of undermine the people who are really doing it well and who are really doing it like with purpose and passion. Plus, I think if I join multiple communities, I get that fatigue that, okay, I'm constantly checking the Slack and the Discord that, okay, what's happening here, and then I'm not being active part of any of those groups. I'm just like there as a silent observer, but not a active participant. And I think that's not great for any community or any product as well.
Right. And community just has such a broad and unclear definition that, I've heard people talk about community and it's really like social media marketing or social media managers, which are very, very important. And if you want to call them community, I think you have an argument too. If you didn't want to call them community, I think you have an argument there. So even when you just hear the word community, it's very unclear what people are talking about. And any title that is like that, which my title is director of community. So I'm kind of, I'm not being a hater to anyone but myself. Maybe it's like, it is important to really pin down, like, what do you actually do? What does community actually mean at your company for your role? Because it can be very, very different depending on who you talk to.
Yeah. I'm actually moved to my last two questions, and one of this might be a little technical for folks who will listen to this later, who are not from the community industry. But I'm seeing a trend, at least here in India, which is about having in-app communities. Like there's a shopping app, like a mega shopping app that we have here in India, and they have started their own, let's say, community vertical within the app itself.
Cool.
So it's part of their shopping experience. What do you think? Will we see more such in-app communities from brands and products, especially the ones who already have an app? Creators and small brands might still hop onto a Slack or a Facebook group or Discord or maybe WhatsApp community as well. But do you think community can become like one main offering of a bigger product?
That's really cool to hear about this app. I think that's a really interesting idea. I'd love to know more about it and see how it's going. But in my general framework, I would say a lot of community is about friction. And so my hypothesis hearing you talk about this app is that the app is driving a lot of traffic. Like people are already clicking on the app for one reason or another. And so if they add community to the app, there's very little friction between the end user, the customer, and that community because they're going there often. It's the same reason why so many digital communities are built on Slack. It's not that Slack honestly has the best community features. It really doesn't. It's the idea that there's no friction. And friction is a very interesting thing to think about. What I mean by no friction on Slack or for in-app is think about Slack. I'm on it every day for work. So the friction for me to go from my work channel to a digital community is about 2 centimeters going down and clicking a button on my computer. There's no friction. I'm in it, I'm out it. In fact, I'm getting notifications trying to pulling me back in. There's no friction. Now, if you go to a platform like Circle, unless you're like actively in a lot of cohort-based courses, no one's running their company on Circle. You're not going there for news. Like you're only going there for community. So there's a lot more friction to get you to come back every single day if you're running it on Circle. And so it has more community features. It's a more intentional space because people aren't just there for no reason. That is one of the downsides of having no friction. People on your Slack are just like, I'm just on Slack hanging out and I'm clicking around 8 different communities and I'm sending a bunch of random shit. Circle, you're not going to get that because there's more friction. You have to be much more intentional. And so I always think of community at the level of friction, and it just depends on what you're optimizing for. I think if you have a short time-bound experience, like an 8-week program, I would put it on Circle, because I think for 8 weeks, if you're providing enough value, people can, one, overcome that initial barrier to get an account and make Circle. And two, you kind of create this very intentional space, like, hey, give me 8 weeks, check this for 8 weeks, and you get much better conversation because it's very intentional. But I think if you, for a year, ask someone, or 2 years, to keep coming back to Circle, eventually they're just going to lose to like what's easier. If you're having a community that you think is going to be forever, I would really look at what this app is doing, what Slack is doing, which are frictionless or less frictionful communities where it is easy to retain someone for a long time because it's in front of their face every single day. And so it's an interesting conundrum. I really like the idea of building a community on an app because it is reduced friction for people to get involved in the community. So it's an interesting idea, and excited to learn more about how that goes for this company.
Yeah, I'll definitely share more with you on this. My last question, and I think there's something out of my personal curiosity because I sometimes face this. What is one theory, or let's say one thing about your community leadership that most other community leaders don't agree with? Like, for example, I'll sort of answer this for myself. I actually feel I am okay with slow growth of community in the beginning stages. Like, for example, when I built the creative community here in India, in the first 1 year, we only had like 2,000 members. In the second year, we had total of 5,000 members. In the third year, we had 10,000 members. But by the end of fourth year, we had 50,000 members. So I'm actually okay to spend at the beginning a slow growth process, but most other leaders might not be willing to do that. So is there a theory, or let's say a trait of your leadership style that most other people don't agree with?
That's a really good question. The thing I would have said, but we already talked about it a bit, is this idea that you have to justify the ROI of community, and it isn't clear. And I think a lot of people purposely make it a bit obtuse because they know it probably isn't driving business success. But since I already said that, I'm trying to think of another thing that someone would disagree with. And the one that comes to mind is like, I actually think some of the best community leaders are people that haven't been in just community their entire lives. I think that the best community leaders are often someone that has many different experiences outside of community. They really thoroughly understand business, because community is one of those pieces where you have to be able to articulate how this is valuable, because it's not obvious to everyone. If you do sales, everyone gets why sales is important. It's like, okay, you sold something for 100K, we made 100K, you're valuable. And it's quite easy to see the ROI, even on an individual salesperson. I know there's some nuance there, but it's a lot clearer. So I think, one, being very business savvy is super important for community leaders. I think that there's maybe a stereotype, whether it's true or not, I'm not sure, that community people are like very bubbly and warm and welcoming. And sure, that's fine, but I think you have to be almost a little more like calculated, organized, operational, business savvy to really make it work inside of a business whose ultimate goal is to make money. And then the second part of that is like having experiences outside of community. I think it's a lot easier to learn like good community skills, like how to welcome people and how to create great environments and how to have some difficult conversations, than it is to become knowledgeable about a lot of topics that your community is going to be interested in. So if I was given two sets of raw materials, someone that had a lot of knowledge around a lot of different business topics, let's say I was building a business community, but had never done community in their life, and I had someone that had led communities all over, but they didn't really they were just killer at community, but didn't have maybe the knowledge for that particular community you wanted to build. I think I would hire the first person probably 10 out of 10 times, where I can train you on the community stuff, but what I need you to do is be able to have tons of conversations, make connections, share valuable resources. And if you don't understand the customer, the community member of your community, if you don't understand what they're interested in, what their field is all about, then you're going to have a really hard time connecting with them, sharing valuable resources. And I think you're going to be a less effective community manager. And so maybe that's a disagreement. Like, I think it's pretty easy for most people, if they wanted to become part of community and get good at it. It's a lot harder to kind of have this knowledge scaffolding that you've probably had to build up over 10 to 15 years to really understand a lot of different industries. So maybe that's my hot take.
I'm actually glad you said you'll hire the first person, because I would do the exact same thing. I wouldn't, I would really want somebody who understands.
Then maybe it's not a hot take. Maybe I messed up.
No, but I can imagine other leaders probably hiring the second person a lot, because they don't want to invest a lot of time in training, because let's say a specific vertical knowledge anybody can like absorb these days from internet, but they wouldn't want to spend a lot of time training that new hire. But Kyle, I think this has been very thought-provoking and insightful conversation for me. And I'm sure everybody who's going to watch this and listen to this, they'll enjoy this equally. And I hope I keep connecting with you at least once in a year. We met at that event last 2021, and probably this year. And hopefully let's be in touch and maybe do this at a bigger scale
for 2024. Yeah.
Super. Thank you so much, Kyle, for taking out the time to do this.
Of course. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the great conversation. And yeah, I'll see you in a year or sooner.
Thank you. Thank you so much.